here. For this is the Fujifilm Instax Mini 8. And you may or may not be familiar with these sort of cameras. This is a new version. There has been the Instax Mini 7 before it and a few other different versions. Polaroid even made one, basically the same camera but rebranded. But this is the newest and greatest low-tech camera technology. And seeing as though I've actually given away a few of these in our past photo challenges that we've had here on DigiDirect TV, I thought I might as well take a look on video about why I think this camera is so special, why I think it's worth owning, and why I've been giving away as a prize to a few of you out there, and why it's so much fun. The Fujifilm Instax Mini 8 is, as you may imagine, a very simple bit of gear, but it's still got a few options to help you control what's going on, to some extent. Switching it on is easy. Hit the button on the side of the lens barrel and the lens thrusts itself onto the world and the camera powers up. Take a shot, the instant exposure pops out the top, and after a few minutes your photo fades into view. Very simple. Film cartridges load in the back, all very simple and easy. Each one will score you 10 shots. The shutter button sits below a little optical viewfinder that is, if we're honest, of little more use than helping you approximate your framing, because it is a bit squinto-visiony, and what you see is not exactly what you get either, especially for close-up objects, as the parallax difference between where the viewfinder is and where the lens is pointed at is going to be off. So learning to compensate for that parallax difference is part of the trick to really getting this camera to do what you want it to do. The other thing is what we'll call the aperture adjustment. A ring around the barrel can be turned to several settings which you'll have to choose manually depending on lighting conditions and the effect you're after. Full sun, partial sun, open shade and indoors are the main ones, but there's also a high key mode which is new to this model. The old Instax Mini 7 did not have that one. Those little holes up there help the camera approximate light levels and will light up what it thinks the appropriate setting is to use. And it's usually correct. Yish. But this is also one of those things that experience and experimentation will give you some creative wiggle room on. Now, back to that high key function. High key deliberately overexposes. It's pretty useless outdoors, but inside, and for portraits, it can give a nice effect and can help flatter skin tones, mainly by washing them out. But hey, this is more a toy than a tool, so what are you expecting? Now, by now, I expect you'll have noticed that I've got the flash covered up. That's a little piece of white electrical tape, and I'm using it to both diffuse the light from the flash and to suck down its power a bit. For my tastes, the naked flash was just way too harsh, and doing this has really made the results a lot more pleasant for me. It's a much softer, more natural, and much more flattering light now. It's also affected the color temperature. Everything's just a little bit warmer now, which is also quite pleasant. And seeing as there is absolutely no way, short of dismantling the camera, to actually disable the flash from firing for each and every shot, I think this is an important little hack to know. Completely covering the flash with your hand while shooting is another option if you've got adequate light in the scene and would rather not have a front-on flash firing and messing up the shadows or tones that you're actually trying to capture. The Instax Mini 8 is primarily aimed at, teenage girls, let's face it. Pretty much all of the marketing and even the box itself just screams that. Thankfully though, aside from the pretty pastel colours it comes in, there is, of course, as you can see here, a somber black edition for those of us who have a Y chromosome, or for those of us who just prefer to have something a bit more subtle. And as for the results, well, they're what you may expect if you've ever seen any similar instant print analog photography stuff. Most likely Polaroid, of course, and the Impossible Project stuff, which took off where Polaroid left off. It's a really nice camera to have on a night out for some spontaneous portraits of friends having a quiet beer or 7. Its analog and physical nature seems somehow more playful and locally social than snapping a photo is with your phone and popping it up on Twitter or Facebook or something, which is kind of remote social, I guess. It's just more fun somehow. And for the more abstract, documentarian, or even landscape type shooting, it has its own charm too. The images are, by nature, softer and more organic feeling than any digital or Instagram filtered shot can actually be, and that gives it its own charm. I've had my Instax Mini 8 since they first hit shelves, and while I don't reach for it as often as I do for one of my quote-unquote proper digital cameras, when I do throw it in my bag, it's always proven itself to be a breath of fresh air. Oh, and another pro tip while we're at it. A simple business card holder works wonderfully as a way to keep your shots safe, unbent, and unscratched when you're throwing them into your bag. They are the perfect size for it. There's also that handy pocket in the back of all moleskin notebooks, which I'd say is a safe bet on every Instax owner actually having one of those on hand as well. The Instax and the moleskin books just seem to go together somehow, don't you think? All part of that little physical world that I'm sometimes scared that our smartphones will take away from us. Don't get me wrong, I'm not giving up my smartphone anytime soon, but, this is nice too. There's just a physicality about it that's really, really nice. So that is the Fujifilm Instax Mini 8. Go and buy one. I highly suggest it. I highly recommend it for a bit of fun, a bit of experimentation, something fresh, something completely different than what you're perhaps used to shooting with. It can spark your imagination in new and interesting ways. Playing within limitations is one of those artistic concepts that will never ever sort of fall out of fashion. If you limit yourself, shooting with just one prime lens, for example, on your traditional film or digital photography, you should go out there with one lens only and then experiment and play. This is the same sort of concept. It has limitations, it has compromises, it has, it's not a do-all, be-all thing. It is just what it is, and it forces you sort of to get creative, to think. Or, conversely, you just take it out when you're on the piss and have some fun snapping photos of your friends pulling funny faces. Either way, definitely worth owning, in my humble opinion. But that is your lot for this week's Did